I was thinking this week about this idea I've expressed in the past. It's from a book on maturity that I read, that life is hard. And that's not, wasn't really planning on starting with this idea this morning. It is Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. That relationship, like Rima was saying, can often be fraught with some difficulty. So thinking about that and about the last year, more than a year we've had living in this new reality of oftentimes feeling isolated and separated from one another. I was looking for a metaphor for life being difficult or challenging or hard, and I came across this picture, and I think it pretty adequately expresses the idea that it's like walking in a fog. And the longer you look at this picture, you can start to make out shapes kind of in the background in the upper right and left corner. And so it seems like there's a little bit of direction for this person to go, but still you don't really know what you're doing, and you don't know the effect of the choices that you make. And so I thought we would start this morning just kind of reflecting back over our lives, which sounds like a really heavy topic, but by way of this question, what message would you give your younger self? If you could tell younger you a simple message, what would it be? I'm with you on all of those. For me, it's helpful to think of this question and then say those things to myself now, because we still very much feel like we don't know what we're doing and we can't see the effect of the choices that we'll make. And so those are good messages for us to tell ourselves even now that we're older. As you probably know, I've been working my way through the fruit of the Spirit and this description of love from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and thinking about how we can practice love every day and what it looks like as we examine these attributes. And I do have to confess, I was expecting a couple of the other ones to be more challenging, but the one for today I think is the toughest for us to wrap our hearts and minds around, because it's just different from us. So what I want to focus on today is just a couple of lines down. Love does not boast. Love is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. Love is not self-seeking. And for us, for me, that seems like kind of a random grouping of descriptors for what love is or is not. But for the people who heard this poem first, that would have stuck in their hearts. For reasons I'll talk about here in just a moment. But today I want to talk about humility. And we don't understand humility the way the people in the Bible understood humility. And I'll get to that in a minute. It's not about making yourself feel bad about yourself. That's not what humility is. But humility can very much be the key to living out love. And so I want to examine those together today. It took me on a journey, and I hope it's a beneficial journey for you also as we walk through it. But the first thing that I learned about humility this week is that humility is about sacrificing the obsession with security. We live in a culture that values security maybe most of all. Specifically, the dichotomy is between fear and security. And when choosing between those two, we're going to try to be as secure as we can. I would contend that every major political debate, from the right to access abortion to the right to own a gun, any major political thing you can think of really comes down to two groups of people trying to feel secure and safe. It leads to, I'm not criticizing you if you're one of these people, but preppers, people that prepare for the zombie apocalypse if they're, kind of fantasy minded, or nuclear war, or a terrible tornado, whatever it is. We have this in our culture, we have this drive towards security that maybe is the most high value for people in our culture. We can debate about that. If you disagree, we'll have a lovely conversation. But the same is not true for people that heard the stories and the poems of the Bible when they first were written. For those cultures, the very highest value was honor. You wanted to bring honor to yourself and your family. And that was actually how you felt secure, was having honor and a place in society. The opposite of that was shame. You wanted to avoid shame and gain honor. And if you couldn't do that, you at least wanted to bring shame on other people so that you got less of it. And so all throughout, I'm going to throw a whole bunch of Bible verses at you today, and it's not to overwhelm you or make you like, I'm not trying to pull a fast one on you. I just want you to see how often the Bible talks about honor and shame and humility. It maybe is one of the most frequently cited concepts that we just tend to glance over because it's not part of our inner heart and mind. We're security minded, and they are very much shame and honor minded. And so we put these verses, some of the most popular verses in the whole Bible, you might not even recognize, talk about shame and honor. This one from Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? In 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. In James 4:6, it says, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Humility is dangerous for the people that heard these verses the most because humility looks a lot like shame. Humility is definitely not bringing honor to yourself or seeking your own honor. It seems like the wrong thing to do, to be humble. And so then you have this verse in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3-4, that says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. And I can imagine the people that heard Paul write these words the first time felt a little bit of panic, because if you're not looking out for yourself, who's looking out for you? And so it's easy when they come across this idea of counting others as more significant than themselves. It doesn't mean they don't consider their own needs, but they look to the interests of other people also. And that can feel dangerous. Because as you know, if you're not looking out for yourself, then it's entirely possible that no one is looking out for you. And so that verse in particular gets to this idea not only of honor and shame and humility, but also of security, because we very much want to be secure. We have this survival instinct within us. And so I think for us, one of the ways we can get at what it was like for these first hearers of this verse to understand and to start to let go of that drive for honor and for our drive for security is to count, to list, to write down all of the ways that God has taken care of you. This might go back a little bit to that question we started off with, is what would you tell your younger self? Somebody said, it's going to be okay. List, think about, meditate on all the ways that God has brought you to the place you're at right now. And you can start to not feel so insecure. You can start to not panic about your own security. You can start to trust that God will be with you and will take care of you. And so humility very much is about sacrificing the obsession with security that allows us to move from thinking about me to thinking about we. And that maybe is the essence of humility, is moving from this focus on self to focus on all of us together. Which brought me to the idea of realigning your heart. This concept of shame and honor, when you start to look at the difference about trying to stay out of the shame category and move into the honor category, it's a lot of maneuvering. It's a lot of thinking about what you're going to do and what you're going to say and how you're going to act in different situations. And it essentially becomes very much focused on yourself. And when your heart is focused on itself, it's difficult to allow other people in. And so you have this crazy rabbi that came along and said some things like in Matthew chapter 6, verse 2, "So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full." He said, continue to do good, but don't do it to get honor. Do it secretly. In our house, we talk about being a love ninja. Do the good thing and make sure absolutely nobody catches you doing it, because you're not doing it for your own honor or regard. In Matthew 23, verse 12, Jesus says, "For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." This was flying in the face of everything these people were trying to do every day to gain honor and avoid shame. Jesus was saying, don't do that. In Mark 9:35, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "If anyone wants to be first, he must be the very last and the servant of all." I'm pretty sure that Jesus was aware that in calling people to humility, he wasn't saying don't take care of yourself. He wasn't saying you're not important. He was saying take the focus off of yourself. Because if you're focused on yourself, you can't love. In Romans chapter 12, verse 3, Paul says, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned." We are not told to stop thinking about our own needs. We're told to not think of ourselves more highly than we ought to, because we are important and valuable. But so is everyone else. Everyone is loved by God. And if we're focused entirely on ourselves, we cannot share the love that God has poured into us with others, because we can't even see others. And so that's what humility is about. One of the ways I've found to try to open my heart to other people is to actually feel what it's like inside my heart to love other people. So just make a list of the people. It doesn't even have to be people you don't like. Just make a list of all the people that you care about and feel love for each and every individual one of them. When you do that, it becomes like an avalanche. When you start to feel love just for the people in your inner circle, it's easier to feel love for people that are not in your inner circle. For those people that are just in your life and they're kind of neutral, to feel how much God loves for them. And eventually, you can feel love for people that kind of irritate you, and maybe people you wish weren't really in your life at all. As we practice love, as we practice feeling love, it becomes easier to share it with more and more people. We can feel love to expand who's in with us. So humility for me is about realigning your heart toward love for all that allows us to feel secure just as we are. We don't have to puff ourselves up or make sure people know we're important, because we're not focused on ourselves. We're focused instead on love for everyone. The last thought that kind of trickled out of all of these verses was about dropping our image. Humility is about dropping our image. every time I look up, I Google tough guy, just the words tough guy, and I go to the image search, and almost always the first article that has an image of something like this is titled something like "How to Be a Tough Guy or at least Look Like One." We are so obsessed with, if we don't have it all together, at least looking like we do, to put forth this image of being secure. And then maybe if people think we're secure, maybe we'll actually feel that way on the inside. That's not really how it works. But we have this image that we often try to portray so that we can feel secure in who we are. For the people that first heard the passages in the Bible, it was about being being honorable and worthy of honor. For us, it's about security and strength and not being afraid. And then I found this verse that is kind of a convergence of all of those ideas of shame and honor, of our image, and of sacrificing our security. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 8, Paul says this of Jesus: "Being found in appearance as a man, He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Over and over and over again in all of these passages, I'm struck by the idea that humility and giving up our security really lead to the same end. And it's scary. It's scary to drop our obsession with security. It's scary to drop our image of what we want other people to think about ourselves. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 30, Paul says, "If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness," which is super ironic, and I love it. And for whatever reason, it reminded me of this kind of obscure character called Dr. Manhattan. He's in a graphic novel called The Watchmen. Dr. Manhattan became so powerful that he was untouchable. He could not be injured by anything. Time no longer affected him. He was basically the most powerful being in existence, excluding God, which the comic is playing around with the idea of God. What happens with Dr. Manhattan is he becomes completely isolated. Because he is invulnerable, he cannot make connections with regular human beings. And so the person that he loves, he eventually just stops caring about because she's going to grow old and die. I think he winds up like on Mars by himself because, he can breathe in outer space. He just goes to Mars and just lets millennia pass alone because he's invulnerable. And that's really what invulnerability, that's what ultimate security does to us. It isolates us from other people. It makes us incapable of love. And so I think one of the ways that we can practice humility and also drop our obsession with security is to show up just as you are. There's a tree in my front yard that I have named Tallulah. And if you look at Tallulah, she's lovely. She has big green leaves, but she's a little lopsided. If you look at a tree long enough, you can start to see that they're not perfectly symmetrical. But really, nobody looks at a tree and is like, that tree's kind of imperfect. We need to do some chopping. We look at trees and we think, magnificent. They give us shade. They're lovely. They make things cool. The birds roost in them. They may be really sideways and crooked, but the tree is exactly the way the tree is supposed to be. If it's crooked or if it got struck by lightning, it might not be shaped the way many other trees are, but that doesn't mean it's a bad tree. The same is true for us. We are all different and we are all imperfect. We have weird personality quirks. And I'm convinced that God has made us the way we are. And so we shouldn't try to look like anyone else. We should just show up as we are. Kind of like Michelle was saying earlier, just be yourself. That's a risky, scary thing because maybe not everyone will like who you actually are. Maybe some people will reject you, but ultimately you'll find your real friends and you'll have real security that won't be based on putting out an image that you want other people to see. It's scary and it's worth it to show up just as you are. And so for me, humility is about dropping our image. And it's what allows us to live a life full of love rather than void of it. So I'm thinking about humility and security. There are some practical ways that we can practice these concepts of not being obsessed with security, to count all of the ways that God has taken care of you, about opening our heart to other people. We can feel love to expand who's in, and in so doing, not really be focused so much on ourselves anymore. And if we're still feeling insecure, if we're trying to moderate our image, just to show up, practice showing up in places just the way that you are and feel other people's appreciation for it and open your heart to love. I ran across this quote. It's not attributed to anyone. I don't know if I completely agree with it, but this idea is that humility is the most important quality in life, for without it, you cannot truly love. And ultimately, that's what we're here for, to follow the great God of love, who loves us like a mother, who loves us like a father, who loves us like a constant friend. And all these attributes found in the fruit of the Spirit and in First Corinthians and many others. Ultimately, our goal is love, and humility might be the most challenging way that we can seek to live out love. So may you remember all the ways that God has brought you here. May you feel God's love for each and every person. May you show up in relationships just as you are. And may humility guide you to a life of peace and love.